Absolutely no state has this restructuring the entire utility regulatory proceeding in the name of DEI. So what does this mean for ratepayers? It lengthens the proceeding. You think the utility pays for it, and they do, but that cost is passed on to consumers. The utility doesn't pay for it. That's part of their cost recovery. The legal cost on this is going to be astronomical.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of PowerGab, your go-to show for all things energy and environmental policy here in the state of Colorado. I'm Jake Fogleman, joined as always by my co-host Amy Cooke. And for this week's show, we need to rewind the clocks a little bit to a little bill that passed 4 years ago now, which is hard to believe, back in 2021. Senate Bill 21-272. Among other things, it was a Public Utilities Commission bill passed by Democrats down at the Colorado General Assembly. Did all sorts of things about, making sure that the PUC considers social cost of carbon when it does rate cases and energy impact bonds. But one of the things that it did was directed the commission, to consider equity and disproportionately impacted communities in all of its decision-making with regard to utilities, with energy utilities. Well, now 4 years later, we have the PUC getting started on that work by issuing a notice of proposed rulemaking. So it's starting to consider codifying regulations to that effect. And they issued a decision about that about a month ago now. And we just had to talk about it on the show because there's a lot in there that, quite frankly, is going to increase your costs. And, I'll let you get into it because there's a lot there.
So notice for rulemaking, and the PUC issued its proposal, and then it is now looking for comments. And I think probably by the time this show airs, comments may already be due. And I'm gonna submit comments on this because listen, almost everything the PUC does is egregious. This one is particularly egregious because, as Jake said, all decisions they seem to make these days, just know there is something going cha-ching, 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 and that is just money flying out of your wallet. This is going to impact you. So as these rates continue to pile up for energy policy, now what we're going to see is they're piling on social policy on top of that will, of course, do what? Yeah, drive up your rates. So this, as Jake said, it's a Senate Bill 20, it's from 2021, so it's SB 21-272. And I think, Jake, in our defense of not saying anything about this earlier, is that we were gone. You had just started here. I was an
intern at the time.
At the Independence Institute. Yeah. I was in North Carolina actually trying to get reliability into statute down there, which we did, and had no idea what was happening here in Colorado, or certainly wasn't paying enough attention to it. But this is 272 in this particular rulemaking is about a part of the bill that the legislature directs the Public Utilities Commission to consider equity in its work. So not only are you supposed to be looking at affordability and reliability, but essentially so they direct the PUC to do that. The PUC's proposal to do that is essentially to put equity on the same plane with reliability and affordability. So let me just go through a couple of things for you. And by the way, I had to have cheat sheets on this. This is one of those, I saw this and I said, what? This can't be. So it requires, it says to consider equity. And the first thing that I'm going to say about this, the Public Utilities Commission, the PUC, I think, after looking at, is grossly exceeding the authority given to it from the Colorado legislature. So a couple of things. One, they take what is a consideration and they put it into, they consider it now a requirement. So not just consider equity, but they're actually requiring equity. And they're doing it through something called equity impact proceedings. I don't even know what that means, but it's automatically is going to apply to most utility filings, including ERPs, gas infrastructure plans, and base rate cases. With that will also be a mandatory pre-filing outreach, documentation, and notice requirements. Now, those notice requirements, you might have seen them. You get them in your utility bill. Well, now they're going to have to translate them into a variety of languages. So now you're going to need to know what the primary language is of your ratepayer. It's not enough that you just supply them with the notice, or that the ratepayer should be able to. Probably has a cell phone. Put it into Google Translates. I mean, do what the rest of us do when we go to another country. But so they may have to translate it into another language. So you have these outreach programs that they're going to have to do. Here's the other thing. This rule specifically shifts the burden of proof to the utility. So they have to prove that they aren't, or that they are considering equity, not just reliability and affordability, but that they are considering equity on an equal level playing field. So we now have mandatory pre-filing outreach documents and notice requirements that include language translation, but it shifts that burden of proof now to the utilities. They're going to have to prove that they aren't violating the PUC's subjective rules on equity. Now, let's go back and remember, or just remind you, the legislature said the PUC shall consider equity. It doesn't say you must include equity in everything you do now. It also allows for settlement approval on equity showings and responses to community concerns. So in other words, you're going to have these, disadvantaged communities, or what are they called, marginalized communities, that are going to be able to weigh in on settlement agreements. The other one allows for community compensation, for which I don't think, Jake, you and I would ever get any money on this. But the community compensation, so if you're from a disadvantaged community, and I'm going to make the case that ratepayers and taxpayers are now a disadvantaged community. We should be able to make that claim, because I dare say in Colorado, it's 100% true. But they can compensate representatives of that community to come in and speak, or provide comments, or intervene. And it isn't specific. It doesn't provide a lot of details other than, the commission's going to allow this. So all of those things, when you put all of those things together, this community compensation, the settlement approval, shifting the burden of proof, these mandatory pre-filing outreach, documentation, notice, these consideration requirements that they'll have to do it, seems to likely goes beyond the authority that the legislature gave, or the direction that the legislature gave to the PUC. And I'll let you comment on that. And then we got a couple of other things, like what it means to ratepayers, and then where Colorado fits in with some of the most progressive left states on it.
Hey, I'll save the ratepayer impacts for you, because immediately things stuck out to me, obviously, what this means for ratepayers. But the other thing that, as you were sort of summarizing what the PUC is proposing here, what jumped out to me almost right away is that this strikes me as like NEPA, but for social justice reasons.
Oh, good.
It's like, they have to file equity impact reports, which is sort of like the environmental impact statements that energy projects have to do under NEPA. All these basically every single thing that you hear, all these requirements being layered on to these utility proceedings, think of that as a potential veto point for some group to gum in and gum up the works or file a lawsuit or delay a project, you name it. It's creating little causes of action for any individual group that has any slight claim of any kind of grievance for race reasons, socioeconomic reasons. There's a whole long list of things that the PUC considers here as fitting under a disadvantaged community and needing equity concerns. But every single one of those groups, one, could be compensated to do so, but two, can come in there and say, yeah, I know we desperately need new power because we retired all of our coal-fired power plants and the lights aren't really going to be staying on unless we build something. But we think that you didn't properly consider our narrow, equity concerns properly, and we're going to shut down whatever power plant that you're proposing to build, XL or Black Hills or you name it. And it just, NEPA has been such a hot topic in energy policy for years now. Both the left and the right now realizes that it's kind of a big mess. It's a Gordian knot of regulatory hell, frankly. And you can't get anything done. And Colorado looked at that and said, what if we did that on an even more subjective basis by privileging certain social justice concerns to gum up projects? And that's immediately what stuck out to me with this.
That is a fantastic analogy. And we're going to be submitting comments. I'm going to be using that because that is a fantastic analogy. It's a great way to put it. This is a way to delay every single project. Every single one. And I'll get to the ratepayer impacts in just a few minutes, but I also want to point out, so where does this put us? Like, where does this put Colorado in? If you're looking at, clearly California has something like this and New York has something like this. But if you've seen some of our past shows, you know that, for instance, New York is even backtracking on some of its climate policies. And I would lump this is social justice for climate policy, but they are backtracking on anything that is driving up cost in the state of New York. In California, you even have where Governor Gavin Newsom is begging refineries not to leave the state, that they clearly they need gasoline. But they don't have, no one, and absolutely no state has this essentially restructuring the entire utility regulatory proceeding under the, in the name of DEI or, social justice. No state is doing that. This Colorado, if you were trying to overachieve, I think you did it.
Swinging for the fences.
I think you might have gotten there. And that's what this proposed rule is. It's to restructure utility proceedings and put equity, if you're a three-legged stool, reliability, affordability, and equity. Equity, and I guess, now it's a four-legged stool: environmentalism, equity, affordability, and reliability. And I will say this is why that the change in the mission of the PUC back when, right after Bill Ritter was elected, and it was Ron Binns who did it, and it went from least cost, reliable power to the social, environmental, and economic values that are consistent with the state of Colorado. And who gets to decide what those values are? Well, right now, it is a Public Utilities Commission that was appointed by Jared Polis, that even Chairman Blank, is not always with the other two far left commissioners, Commissioner Gilman and Commissioner Plant. So what does this mean for ratepayers? And this was the most important thing. What does all this mean? every single new procedural requirement, every single mandatory outreach, expanded notice, translations, everything that the extra documentation, this burden of proof that is now shifted onto the utilities that they aren't impacting marginalized communities. Every single thing that this requires does one thing in particular, and that it lengthens the proceeding. So remember, this bill is from 2021. We're at the end of 2025. They're just getting to a rulemaking on it. I mean, we are also looking at, they're still figuring out the clean heat plan. The decision came down about that, but think of how long that took. I think that was that a bill in 2021? And it was 2025 when it was decided. So every single one of these delays, you think the utility pays for it, and they do, but that cost is passed on to consumers. The utility doesn't pay for it. That's part of their cost recovery. They get to recover those legal costs. And make no mistake, the legal cost on this is going to be astronomical, because anything is going to be in court. Anything and everything is going to be in court. And I can't say enough about how perfect your NEPA example. Here's one, and I've brought this up before, the Northern Integrated Supply Project, water storage project in northern Colorado. First discussed, public discussion of it, or it started in the mid-1980s. It just recently broke ground. So, I mean, I don't... The consequences of this are going to be extraordinary, and you're not going to be able to avoid them.
But look on the bright side, Amy. Think about how well-employed lawyers and equity consultants and DEI who are going to be compensated interveners at the PUC. Think about how much money they're going to make. So it probably balances out in the end.
It's an economic development bill for equity consultants. I keep thinking that Colorado can't one-up itself, and yet it just continues to do it. It's just insufferable. I can't even imagine them coming up with these ideas. And by the way, every single ratepayer is going to pay for this. Every single one. So if you think, low income is, no, everyone's going to pay for this. Remember this, Colorado has the highest rates in the Mountain West. And this, and they love to say, oh, we're lower than the national average. To which I say, yes, barely. But if you throw out the high and the low, you're not really lower than the national average. This on top of all of the other things that the Public Utilities Commission, enabled by the legislature, has done or is doing, is going to drive us very close to California rates. And we have no excuse for that. No excuse other than bad policy.
And not only the rates, but think about just how ill-timed this is from a demand standpoint. How often we dedicate shows to the very real supply and demand crunch that we're coming upon. Even take data centers out of it. There was already going to be a problem just because of EVs and aging power plants, and you name it. You naturally are going to need some more power plants. But because of data centers and this is big rush to service the large loads that may or may not be coming to Colorado, frankly, but utilities certainly think so. The commissioners are certainly worried about it. And in that environment, dropping a atomic bomb of vetocracy, essentially, through the entire process, where every single point some niche group can come in and gum up the works and do their own veto that can tie up projects, like your NEPA analogy. Something that started in the 80s is just now breaking ground. Think about how many times we've talked about in national discourse transmission line projects that took 20 years to get permitted and then built, and that's all because of NEPA and laws just like this that require, before you can do anything that's necessary, you have to file all these reports and impact reports and statements and get through court battles and make sure you don't get an injunction before you can break ground. around and make sure every little person's consulted, and you have community outreach meetings, and you better not let a neighbor say that they don't like the way that looks, because that might hold up the project for another 10 years. And that's exactly what we're trying to import here on social justice grounds to the utility planning process. And aside from the rates, this stuff's not free, obviously. It's going to come from rates. It's also going to delay much needed infrastructure, whether or not you want to see wind and solar built or you want to see nuclear built, whether or not you want to keep the coal plants or you want to see new natural gas built. All of that will be affected by this if this goes in place as written and as considered in this PUC decision. So we're coming up on time here, but if you have any takeaways for our listeners on what's at stake here.
I do. Number one, this is a PUC power grab. We are PowerGab, so it's not PowerGab. This is a PUC power grab. They are essentially just rewriting the entire rule book for utility proceedings. That's number one. Number two, we will be submitting comments on this, but I would encourage everybody, February 17th, 2026, there will be a public hearing. Of course, it's remote. Our commissioners don't really like doing that stuff in person. It just means you get a little close. You're there in person. They don't want to actually. They'd look at you, a 3D version of you. They want to see your, on a screen, a flat screen. But it's February 17th, 2026 at 11 a.m. and there's a link, and we'll get all of that into the show notes. So there's that. That's number one, or that's number two. So one is the power grab. Two is please participate in this hearing, February 17th, 2026. You can provide some written comments to that hearing, or you can speak orally. So it's up to you. And then three, get yourself a generator, because it's not going to get cheaper. It's only going to get more expensive. And the best of all, we have a way you can get one, Jake. We are giving away a Predator. I didn't name it, a Predator generator, but we're giving away a generator. And the way you do it is beginning the first show after 2026. We're going to do this. It's going to go on for several months. So you've got time. Don't worry. You've got time. And you can even practice, and you can do it every single week. But what we're looking for are pithy, funny, clever comments that you drop in the comment section on our YouTube channel, PowerGab. But you find us on YouTube. And of course, we'll also put the details of the contest in the show notes. But here's the point. We're going to pick one each week. So, if there aren't very many, you've got a great chance, if you're funny or clever, of having some comment, the comment picked. And then we're going to go through, and it's totally subjective. We get it. Yeah, it's our show. We can have the rules the way we want. We're going to pick the one we like. And then we're going to narrow those down. And at the end, which will probably be, I think, sometime right after the end of the legislative session. Yeah. So there's going to be plenty for you to comment on. That's the fun thing. It's not just one show. It's not just two shows. You're going to have plenty of stuff to comment on. But here's what we're going to let you all then. We're going to let you vote on the best comment. Best comment wins the generator. And we should think about some other fun things that we can throw in with that PowerGab sticker. I don't know. We've got stickers. Anyway, it's going to be a fun contest. Engage with us on our YouTube channel, and chances are you have a good chance of getting your comment picked if you're funny or clever. And then you could be a winner of a generator.
That's right. You could take our advice with that new generator and firm your own grid. And we'd love to do our part to help out. So make sure folks start submitting those comments in the new year. But that does it for us on another episode here of PowerGab. If folks like what they saw, they can head over to powergab.org to check out our entire back catalog. We produce new episodes every single week. We're also available wherever you get your audio podcasts, whether that's Apple or Spotify. And if you'd like to reach out to us to suggest future show topics or guests you'd like to see us interview here on the show, you can send those our way at info@powergab.org. We always love hearing from you guys. But until next week, we'll see you.